We've already seen how to create formal said commands with regular verbs, with stem change verbs, with spell change verbs, and now we're getting ready to see formal said commands with car, gar, and zar verbs. So, as I have said before, it is going to be important now, but even more important later on, whenever this stuff is going to kind of be the basis for other things that we're doing, to have a categorization in your head between what is a regular verb, what is a stem change verb, what is a spell change verb, and now what is a car, gar, zar verb. We're still forming formal usted commands, but again, now I've given you just a few examples. One or two of each kind for car, gar, and zar verbs. If you're thinking to yourself, do I know car, gar, and zar verbs, and you are not quite sure about that, and thinking maybe you might want to go back and refresh or review anything, one of the very first times that you ever see car, gar, and zar verbs is with the preterite, with certain conjugations of the preterite. Does the preterite have anything to do with usted formal commands? No, but this whole idea of car, gar, and zar, if we remember, it's about gar verbs having a GU combination, or better yet, saying that the G is going to be followed by a U in certain conjugations of certain tenses. With car verbs, it's about having that C convert itself into a QU combination. And with ZAR verbs, it's about having that Z change to a C. And where you might think that that sounds familiar could be from the preterite tense. So if you need to do any review with car, gar, and zar verbs, then please make sure to go back and look at the first times that you might have seen that. That would have been with the preterite tense, certain conjugations of that. So assuming that we remember what car, gar, and zar verbs from previous classes or previous lessons or previous semesters, then we're going to go ahead with car, gar, and zar verbs, pretending like we know what happens with them. And now we're just forming formal usted commands with car, gar, and zar verbs. I have actually taken 4 verbs up here that are the 4 most common car, gar, and zar verbs, not only in general, but the most common car, gar, and zar verbs used with formal usted commands. So you will notice if you're looking behind me that as we've been forming, conjugating, making formal usted commands, we've only had 3 steps up on the board, where we have had step number 1, going to the O box of the present tense, step number 2, dropping the O, step number 3, adding the opposite ending. And then now we're going to have a step number 4, and that's to account for with the car verbs, the QU, with the gar verbs, the GU, and with the zar verbs, the Z that changes to a C. So that's the only reason why we have 1 extra step. So we'll look at these 4 examples, and then anytime you need to do any car, gar, or zar verb as a formal usted command, you can look back at this video. So we have this, still making formal usted commands, and we have an example of a car verb. I've had some students ask me before, how do I know when a verb is a car, gar, or zar verb? Luckily for you, it's really easy to figure it out because the verb literally ends in car, or for gar verbs, the verb ends in gar, or for zar verbs, the verb ends in zar or Z-A-R. So you don't have to memorize them, just look and see if the verb ends in C-A-R, Z-A-R, or G-A-R. So for car verbs, we're taking the exemplary verb here, tocar. Tocar can mean to touch, but it can also mean to play music or play a musical instrument. So we have the verb tocar. We want to form a formal usted command with the verb tocar. And so we're still going to follow all the steps. I just put a little reminder here. Again, you might need to go back and review the first time that you might have seen car, gar, and zar verbs. But the reminder here is with car verbs, that C is going to change to a Q, U letter combination. So we'll get there in just a second, but we'll go through all the steps. Step 1 for making formal usted commands, and I'm still going to remind you, for like the bazillion time, never ever ever skip any of the steps, especially now whenever we have one more added step to account for the CAR GAR ZAR changes that are going to occur. So our step one is to take the verb tocar back to the yo conjugation of the present tense, and when we do that, we get toco, T-O-C-O. Then step number two is to drop that O. So I've done that right here, and we're left with T-O-C. And then normally we'd be done with step number three, because step number three is just about adding in opposite endings. So I've done that, but we're not done yet. So we have T-O-C, and then I added the opposite ending. Since we had an AR verb, the opposite ending would be just adding the letter E, but I put big old X here so that you know that this is not the right answer yet. Why is it not the right answer yet? Because this C in CAR verbs must change to a Q-U combination. So that is why we have a fourth step. As you can see, instead of T-O-C-E, once I change the C to a Q-U, that's now how we get the appropriate CAR, tocar, formal usted command. And it's spelled T-O-Q-U-E. Once again, tocar as a formal usted command is spelled T-O-Q-U-E, because that Q-U has to replace the C with CAR verbs, certain tenses, certain conjugations. So our affirmative command, formal usted command for the verb tocar would be pronounced toque, and then we remember that to make it a negative command, we just have to add in the word no, and we would have no toque. So toque, no toque, in terms of formal usted command, both in the affirmative toque and the negative no toque. Big thing to remember on that one is simply for CAR verbs, we need to make sure that C changes to a QU. Then with GAR verbs, and the most common one being llegar, meaning to arrive, llegar, to arrive, we need to remember that the G is going to be followed by a U. So there's going to be a G-U combination that must occur here. But we're still going to go through all of our steps. We just have an added one to make sure that we account for this G changing to a G-U combination. And so our step number one is to take it back to yo conjugation of the present tense. And that will be Diego, L-L-E-G-O. Step number two is to drop the O, which I have done right here. Step number three is where we would normally be done with formal usted commands, but we're not. I put a big X there to remind us that we're not done yet, because we haven't taken into account this G that has to change to a G-U combination because it is a GAR verb. So normally we'd be done here because we would have added opposite endings. Since llegar is an AR verb, the opposite ending would just be adding an E. So that's what I've done, but we have not finished yet. So you'll notice I had step number two, L-L-E-G, and then I would normally just add an E, that opposite ending, but we're not done because of what I've got underlined here for you. This G can't stay a G, it's got to change to be a G-U combination. So once we take care of that, and now our step four, L-L-E-G-U, and then that opposite ending, the E. Now we have our formal usted command, and the affirmative one, for the verb llegar, which is a GAR verb, and it's pronounced llegue, llegue. So it's spelled once again, L-L-E-G-U-E. That will be the affirmative. And the negative, we just put the N-O, no, in the front, no llegue. So we have llegue, no llegue. But our verb is going to stay the same. We just put a little no in front of it. Big thing to remember for that one, obviously, is that the G for GAR verbs is going to change to a G-U combination. Then we have ZAR verbs. I just want to say that we call them ZAR verbs, but Z sound doesn't exist in Spanish. Please remember that I'll call them ZAR verbs because that's how we teach it. But remember that the letter Z in Spanish is always going to make an S sound. So as I say these words, don't expect for me to be pronouncing it like a Z. Expect for me to be pronouncing it like an S. So all Z's in Spanish make S sounds. So the thing that's tricky with ZAR verbs and formal said commands and other tenses that you may have seen or that you may see in the future is that most ZAR verbs are not only ZAR verbs, but they're also generally stem change verbs. So it's just a pain sometimes because you have so many things to recognize and to remember how to do and not forget, and so many things that you can mess up. But I've taken us through all of the steps here. So the most common ZAR verbs that happen to be used as formal usage commands are almorzar, which we're going to do, and that is to lunch, to have lunch, to eat lunch, almorzar. And then the next two most common ones are actually interchangeable and they mean the same thing. And it's comenzar and empezar. Comenzar and empezar both kind of mean the same thing. They're used interchangeably most of the time by fluent Spanish speakers. Comenzar meaning to commence, empezar meaning to begin. So they can be used interchangeably. I have chosen to do empezar as an example for you, but please know that if you would like to practice, you can practice with comenzar, and remember that all of these ZAR verbs that I have up on the board, and most of them that you will see in life, are going to be not only ZAR verbs, but they're also going to be some sort of stem change verb. So we'll go through the motions on this one. Looking at almorzar, again, remember that it means to eat lunch or to have lunch. We have almorzar. The big thing to remember about ZAR verbs is that the Z is going to change to what? A C, right? So the Z changes to a C. We have to remember to account for that as we're working with ZAR verbs. But also, we have to remember that whenever we take the verb almorzar back to the yo conjugation of the present tense, it happens to be an O to UE stem change verb. So O to UE stem change verb is another thing that we have to worry about. So step number one is going to stay the same. We just have a couple of things that we could mess up, but if we follow the rules, then hopefully we won't. So we take our verb almorzar back to step one, yo conjugation of the present tense, and that is almuerzo. Almuerzo. A-L-M-U-E-R-Z-O. Almuerzo is the yo conjugation of the present tense. Remember, that's step number one. Have we accounted for the ZAR thing that happens, the Z changing to a C yet? No, not yet. But have we accounted for the stem change? Sure, of course we have, because almorzar is an O to UE stem change, and we can see this UE right here. So we've already accounted for the stem change that occurs if we remember how to get almorzar back to the yo conjugation of the present tense. So that's step number one, almuerzo. Then step number two would naturally be just to drop the O, which is what I've done in step number two. And then the third step is usually where we would be done, but I put again a big X there to tell you, no, we're not done yet. And why are we not done? Because step number three would normally just be adding opposite endings. Since almorzar is an AR verb, the opposite ending that we would attach would be the letter E. And we did that, but why are we not done? Because now is the time that we have to account for the ZAR thing that happens and that Z changing to a C. So we're not done because this isn't a word. In order for us to be done, we have to change that Z to a C, like I have done right here. So our affirmative formal usted command for eat lunch is almuerce. Almuerce, and it's spelled A-L-M-U-E, accounting for the stem change, R-C-E. C, accounting for the Z that has to change to a C because it's a ZAR verb, and then our opposite ending, E, right? So again, almuerce is spelled Almuerce, and we've taken care of the Z that changes to a C, we've taken care of the O-to-UE stem change that occurs, and we have almuerce, or the negative, don't eat lunch or don't have lunch, no almuerce. Then I have one more example up here of a ZAR verb that is also a stem change verb, but it's not an O to UE stem change verb, it is an E to IE stem change verb. The verb empezar, once again, means to begin. So, yeah, we have to pay attention to the Z changing to a C. We're not going to worry about that until step 4. We have to worry about the E to IE stem change that occurs, and we're going to worry about that in step 1 whenever we take it to the O conjugation of the present tense. So, step number 1, the O conjugation of the present tense, empiezo, empiezo, E-M-P-I-E-Z-O. And then step number 2, we just drop the O, which is what I've done. And then step number 3 would normally be done with formal commands, but we have that Z to C change that we're going to have to account for, and that's where we have another step. So once again, big old X right here telling you that we're not done yet because we haven't accounted for the Z to C change in ZAR verbs with formal usted commands. So have I added an opposite ending? Yes. It was an AR verb, so the opposite ending that would be appropriate for formal usted commands would be this E right here, but this is not a word, it's not correct, because it still has its Z, and we know that ZAR verbs have to have a C there instead. So once we change the Z to a C, now we are done with our formal usted command for begin. And that will be pronounced empiece, empiece, and it is spelled E-M-P-I-E-C-E, empiece. And if I wanted to say, no, don't begin, or don't start, then it will be no empiece, no empiece. So these are examples of CAR, GAR, and ZAR verbs. If you ever have any question about how to tackle a CAR, GAR, or ZAR verb with formal usted commands, you can look back at this video and know how to do all of them. If you wanted to practice on your own, you could attempt to do comenzar. Remember that I said it's interchangeable with empezar. Comenzar means to begin or to commence. Just to give you a hint, obviously not only is it a ZAR verb in which the Z would have to change to a C, which we have been tackling in step 4 up here, but the verb comenzar is also an E to IE stem change verb. So I would recommend, if you follow the pattern of empezar, I would recommend trying to do comenzar on my own, because it is a ZAR verb, just like this one was, and it is also an E to IE stem change verb, just like this one was. So formal usted commands with CAR, GAR, and ZAR verbs, and if you need any refresher on CAR, GAR, and ZAR verbs in general, go back and look. Generally, in the preterite, certain conjugations will have introduced you to what CAR, GAR, and ZAR verbs are. But the big thing to remember, I guess, is simply that once again, with CAR verbs, that C is now going to change to a QU combination. With GAR verbs, that G is going to now change to a GU combination. And with ZAR verbs, most of the time there's stem change as well. But the thing to remember is that Z is going to have to change to a C. And that is formal usted commands with CAR, GAR, and ZAR verbs.